I'm sorry, Dr. Allen?
Yes.
There's been a slight change of plans. I think you'll have to sit down on the front row. Someone wants to talk to you right now.
Oh, hello there. Well, look who's there. It's my son, Steve. Hi, Steve. I don't think you are because you don't drink, but it's nice to be able to, in my official capacity as your father, by the authority invested in me by the vest I'm wearing, I just want to say a few words here. Linoleum, ectoplasm, bird seed, those are the few words that I have a mind to say. But I have known my son, man and boy, since I was a man and he was a boy. No, we go back to 1942, Steve and I. And then, of course, the management came upstairs and said we were making too much noise in 1942, so they moved us across the hall to 1943. And that taught us a very important lesson. Believe you me. Why people say believe you me when they sound like they're talking backwards, I've never been able to figure out. But ours not to reason why. But I, for one, and T for two, am very happy to take the occasion to tell Steve that if he doesn't do a good job today, he's going to be sent to his room. However, he doesn't have a room because he often stays at the airport when he's on these trips. But he's a very funny young man. He was a funny kid. And I remember I laughed hysterically the first time I ever saw him. And I still am. He's a doctor now. My son the doctor, as we say. So I think if I continue in this generally pointless vein, while I guess he, would be pleased initially to have seen my face, just to recall that I still have one, he probably would be embarrassed. Because I, after all, am his father. Not to all you folks. Well, knowing some of your mothers as I do, that's a good question. But it's clear that I am his father. And we're always a little embarrassed by our mothers and fathers. I know I was embarrassed by my mother from time to time. And so even at this moment, Steve could be thinking, okay, Dad, wind it up. In 3 or 4 minutes now, and it's running downhill. So I will do that. But I have every confidence, well, not every confidence, but I have a certain amount of confidence that Steve will distinguish himself in your midst today. And I certainly am proud of him. And perhaps someday he'll be proud of me. So,
let me just get an additional sense of who's here today. Just with a quick show of hands, how many, we'll start with the broad group, how many people are here today? It's 35% in this room. I know there's an overflow room in another part. We'll have to find out what their results are. I do welcome the other 60% of you who've chosen to come today. Well, let me ask, how many important people are here today? There's more of those than there are actual people, but I do welcome all of you. How many would consider themselves fairly stressed in recent months? Fewer of you. How many would be too stressed to raise your hand at this point? I'm sure they'd said to Dad, I don't know, fill 4 or 5 minutes, and actually he did 7, I counted up there, which I think comes off of my time somehow. How many are absolutely convinced that they'll have a job in a year? See, the assistant director did not raise her hand, I noticed. But aside from that, and given the heritage that you saw with the amount of silliness that one can make with just blank time on the clock, I'm going to suggest that you give some thought to your last words. And I think they ought to be funny words. That is, you could plan serious words, but it's very hard to be serious for all posterity. You have something on your tombstone that will say, they'll look back and quote you at the beginnings of books and things. I suggest that you make it funny and write it down, put it in your wallet next to your insurance card with a note that says, "If found unconscious, tell them I said this." So you can see the scene in the emergency room. My wife, Andrea Parrott, who will actually be on CNN this Friday night, in case you're watching. I said, "Dr. Parrott, Dr. Allen's been in a serious accident." And at some point, after getting the details, she'll say, "Did he say anything?" And the doctor will go, "Yeah. He said 2 tall people and a camel walk into a bar." And then he lapsed into unconsciousness. It might brighten a few moments that are otherwise fairly tense in life. Well, that's just by way of introduction to the lightheartedness that you see is both genetic and learned in our family. And I'm going to encourage you now to enjoy with me, to play with me, literally, over the next 5.5 hours until we're... Wait a minute, the grant committee is meeting. No, in the next 35 or 40 minutes, I'm going to ask you to play with your right brain without giving it much thought with your left brain while we talk to both brains, actually. So in order to get people in the mood for the kind of playfulness that I'm talking about, it takes a little doing something. I'm going to ask you to take those brightly colored doodads you were given, and I'd like you to take a lesson on playfulness from a person you brought with you. That is the 3-year-old that sits inside of each of your adult and sometimes young shells. That 3-year-old who knows what life is like when play is all one does. One learns about life through play at age 3. One experiments with life and your body and the world with play. So please, if you will, take those 3 brightly colored doodads, decorate the adult on your chair in as outlandish and silly a way as you possibly can. We have some people who need scarves down front, so if we could get 5 or 6 sets of scarves, that would be wonderful. Yeah, of course, it's a 3-year-old behavior. We're excusing all adults from this. All grants will continue to be funded. And the retirement plans will be unaffected by your behavior today, even though there are 4 cameras and the video of this can be obtained. And we'll fund Camp Fantastic for the next... In case you want to run for elected office, we will destroy your image. Excellent. Very, very good. Now, if there is anybody with some significant visual impairment in the room, I would encourage you, if you so choose, to get a visual report from people on either side of you. Don't rely on the poetry of just one person, but ask them on either side to describe the room now. And I know you don't all work together, but I want you to look around the room for the moment. I want you to remember the faces as you see them the next time you might call on the phone. Excellent, girls and boys. One of the reasons that they asked me to come today is that I am clearly a high technology NIH user. That is, actually one of the problems for NIH is that the public doesn't understand how vital the information and treatments generated here are to the public welfare. Things that were invented here. Excuse me, let me just point out, I'm trying to encourage people to laugh and giggle, and you're laughing and giggling and interrupting my attempts. And I can understand the reason, because not only at the same moment you noticed, I noticed the gentleman 2 chairs to the right. If you could, as a playful 3-year-old, show as a role model to the others. Could you stand with a plaid shirt, sir? In the front row, could you stand and pirouette around? Just to give a sense of what you're... demonstrating, of course, why you all get to keep your own set of scarves. You can see it on CNN, late-breaking story, outbreak of 700 cases, scarf disease. So I started to say, I am a high-tech user. At age 18, I underwent heart bypass surgery to correct a valve. For the physicians in the audience, it was the aortic valve. It was a little narrow, was opened up. We knew that I needed this at age 13, but the technology wasn't developed enough. And I'm not precisely certain NIH's role in the development of the cardiac lung bypass, but I know that you did have a role, and I owe my existence to that. I've gotten 35,000 miles on my valve, and physicians know that there are some potential side effects for that surgery that now you're alert to in case, for example, dizziness could occur. So if I swoon, you'll know it might have something to do with that. You know at least that part of my medical history. You can have a sudden sudden change to republicanism. It could occur at any moment, in case you see that. So I literally had my 4 fists inside my chest at age 18, and am therefore the alive recipient of the best of care that this country has to offer from its scientists and clinicians. I'm immunized for hepatitis and a variety of other organisms that partly were funded by this research. It doesn't say when Lederberg gets his Nobel Prize how much of it was funded by you folks, but I know that it was. I have a baby who is now 4. Andy, who is a test tube or in vitro baby. And I know that part of the activities of fertility experts around the country are funded by NIH. It is a remarkable bit of technology to have a human life, one of the 10 or 12,000 youngsters in this country who spent 2 days in glassware in Westchester County when Andrea and I were literally in different cities in New York at the time. And then we all reconvened back in Westchester. Well, at now an 8-cell stage, Andy was taken from the glass petri dish and placed inside Andrea's body, and he is healthy and happy and hysterically funny, carrying on the genetic tradition in our family. Sometimes what's funny to you is just sort of how you view things. If you view things as more lighthearted in general, then perhaps you'll find the humor as we saw it when, at age 2, the favorite thing that Andy ever did was wash the windows. He spent 2 days in a petri dish, looking out, going from 1 cell to 8 cells before he was put back in Andrea's body. This seemed funny to us. If he ever goes into the bathroom and on a steamy mirror writes Pyrex backwards, I call Stephen King immediately for the movie rights. Well, the notion that I have, of course, is that laughter is not just okay, it is essential. And you rather quickly said it is good in the workplace and at home and in the rest of our lives, but selling it in the workplace is a very difficult prospect for most organizations because we do very, very serious work. I'll give you an example from my own life as a family doctor in upstate New York. It's now about 8 years since I was awakened at 4 a.m. on a summer day to race to the emergency room, and borrowing heavily on NIH-funded technology, new medications, and treatments was involved in saving a woman's life. She went from death's door, and 50 years ago would have died of that condition, to going off to the intensive care feeling much, much better, well enough to say thank you. I even guessed she was going to pay me for coming in at that time. The family said thank you, the nurses said thank you. I got in my car at 8 o'clock to go to the office, turned on the FM music, and then zipped down the highways of central New York looking at the farm fields, saying what a wonderful job I have chosen. The drama, the intimacy, the spectacle that I'm allowed to witness as a physician. I didn't say saving her life because the nurses knew how to do that actually better than I did. They helped me relearn it as we got there and took care of her problems. But I then saw a woman in the office for the first time, and I began to talk to her about her medical problem and why I thought we hope she continued with us. And at the end of the visit, she said, I would like to bring my family here, but I have one question. And it had that, could you report to the IRS office Thursday afternoon kind of quality to it. I said, what is that? She said, did you know your shirt is on inside out? I looked down, the alligator is on the inside. I had dressed in the dark in a hurry and raced to the emergency room where no one had pointed out that I had my shirt on inside out. I am charging her $22 and my clothes are on backwards on what I'm considering to be a great professional day. You have to be able to laugh at yourself in the midst of those circumstances. Now, I'm going to ask you for a moment to undecorate yourselves and to separate your scars if you felt compelled to tie them together. I'm going to ask you in a few moments to experience with me another kind of play, and I'm going to take your lives into a new realm, and that is, I'm going to ask you to juggle with these. It's a playful experience just to put a smile on your face. I can, in fact, guarantee that I can teach everyone here to juggle, partly because I have a track record of 500,000 people that I have in the last decade taught to juggle, so I feel that I have a pretty good track record. And the second is that I can guarantee it because I have a remarkably low expectation for your performance. And since we're after smiles, it won't take much to get that going. But you will find that you will be able to measure your own progress because I have laid out these instructions as a series of success steps. So you will, in fact, which of us, how do you sign that I'm signing? I'm not sure. A series of successful steps that you will measure your own progress. Now, I'm going to show you how simple they are. In fact, I should tell you ahead of time, there are 12 steps in this juggling program. Some of you are involved in 12-step programs. Some will be getting cards from employee assistants soon, and should heed those, actually. But in fact, this has nothing to do with those 12-step programs, but I encourage you to look into those should someone in your life suggest it. They're usually right. I'm going to show you how simple these are because the first and second are done together. They're holding the scarves and looking at the scarves. Hold the scarves, take a look at them. Don't look at me. Don't look at the people around you and see how they're doing with this. Just bond with them a little bit. Why don't you greet them? Perhaps say, hello, scarves. Good. Very good. Anybody having trouble so far? I will, next is the third step, which merely leads to the fourth. I'll demonstrate them and then turn you loose to try them. The third step is called the toss. It merely leads to the fourth, which is called the guilt-free drop. You might have termed it an error a moment ago, but it isn't. It's a juggling fourth step called the guilt-free drop. You want to get all the, oh, I should have turned in the grant sooner, I wish it had been more priority. You want to get all that kind of shoulda, woulda, couldas out of your shoulders. Toss them in the air if you would. Let them fall to the ground and say, eh. Very, very good. Some of you, I noticed, tossed them in the air, said to yourselves, I'm certain I could drop them, but I choose not to just now. That's a GS7 and above, I think, is the... At any rate, you'll have more opportunity to let go of that, allowing yourself to make an error in public. That's okay. Remember, this is a child's activity. We're encouraging you to think and more accurately feel like a child. We have come 1/3 the way with hardly a moment's hesitation, and you've done exceptionally well. Let me explain the fifth step, which is called the Art Carney shtick. For those of you who grew up in this country watching the 50s television, or almost any country now on reruns, Art Carney as Ed Norton, the upstairs neighbor on The Honeymooners. Anybody watch The Honeymooners? Aunt Audrey Meadows was Alice, my aunt, Jane Meadows' sister. So we watched with special interest in our family, but Ed was this heart of gold but not very bright fellow who lived upstairs. There was one thing that he did in which there was a total transformation of his usual persona, and that was when he agreed to write something down. In which he spent an enormous and poetic amount of time getting himself ready to write something down. He never actually got anything on paper. Just when you thought it was going to, there was this ballet move that would go on. And the thing was, he looked remarkably confident. Now, I'm going to show you what the Art Carney shtick with juggling is. The confidence is the most important part. I'm going to ask you to demonstrate to yourself that you're able to play in this way, that you have confidence in the rest of the steps. To get ready, you put some number of scarves in one hand and another number in the other hand. This avoids math fear. So you have some in one hand, another number in the other hand, and you're not sure what the other 7 steps are to get to the 12th juggling step. But the important thing is, actually, you don't have to know what the other steps are. You just look like you know what the other steps are. So I'm going to show you a simple way, which is that you look so good you don't even have to bother throwing them. That's easy. You could go side to side if you wanted to. You could go clockwise around your back, around the other way. You could do teams. This side could throw to that side, but they never actually leave your hand. That looks silly enough, but for some of us, it's just to get over the adult, act your age, sit up straight, don't be silly in public. That's very hard. So I'm going to give you some motivation here. And John, I'm going to walk over and hit that in just a sec. When the motivation hits you, I'm going to ask you to stand if you're able and do step number 5, the Art Carney shtick. John? Oh, John. That's me. How about the music? Pretend you hear music. Think music. There we go. Okay. Let's do it together, side to side. Up and down. Freestyle. You got it. Can we stand? You got it. You too. Anybody else who wants to? And good, John. Thank you. Whoa. I should say, I'm told you can hear this better now. Is that right? Almost. I should point out that I have called out the instructions as though you have all the same parts as I do, and as though your parts work without pain or restriction. Is not true for everybody in this room. So I will encourage you to do the same thing you do every day you get up, if you have other abilities, which is to translate in your own heart and soul what it is you want to do with this. I have taught this to people with no arms. They use their feet to do it as they drive a car and type on a computer. I've taught it to people with head injuries. I've taught it to people, actually 2 lawyers once. That's just a trade sort of, we diddle about the hostility there, actually. But it was the biggest laugh you've done so far. Yes! Okay. Where was I? Wait a minute. Public speaker, can't remember what he was talking about. Sixth step, thank you. If you ask people in life, all of us are teachers, whether it's orienting a new employee, or a nephew on how to be a nicer person, or giving a talk, presenting your paper, your research, selling your research to outside agencies. Any of those things are teaching experiences. The fear that people have, if you ask them to rate what are the stressful things in life, the biggest fear is talking in front of a group. Because what happened to me, you're afraid will happen to you. But I offer this perspective. You're afraid you'll stand up and not remember what you were about to say. And then you will forget everything you've said up until that point. And then you'll forget what language you were raised in. And all that will come out as you open your mouth will be punctuation, just commas, umlauts, accents. Everybody has that fear, but we've all had that happen. If you're in the supermarket with your sister, you say, excuse me, it's embarrassing, what was I talking about? And she'll tell you. That works with a group here. So next time you're teaching, if that happens to you, as it has, you just say, what was I talking about? Sorry, excuse me. They've all been there. They won't pick on you. They know that they've been there themselves. And they'll tell you. If nobody can tell you what it was that you were talking about, I kind of take an Eastern philosophic approach, you know. It's either a catastrophe for you as an educator or a spectacular opportunity to open up any new topic of your choosing. So, I was, however, talking about the sixth step, as somebody reminded me. The sixth step you did automatically. That was laughing at yourselves, your new acting director, and a doctor doing step number 5. Because laughing at yourself is by far the most effective use of humor as a coping mechanism, as a stress reducer. So, and that's what we're after here. That's what I'm talking about. So from here on out, as we go from this first half to the second half, there's often a tug of war between your right brain and your left brain. The right brain sort of people are the visual, spatial, I got it, let me, you know, they're the ones that were up dancing first, and they're saying, you gave us these toys, I get to take them? Yes, they're yours. You have music, I noticed, you could leave that on and stop talking. We got it. They have the message without the words, and that's wonderful. A lot of us, however, are organized around words, left brain sort of people, and those people are nudging the person next to them and saying, how far apart are his feet? And in NIH, they answer in metric. You know, about 34 point, you know, which is the wavelength of the light. So, listen with your right brain. It is easier to watch this from here on out. Now, I'm going to start with a 7-step and give you the vision first, the right brain image, and then we'll put the words on it. Hold it palm down in either hand, lefties, doesn't matter. Your arm goes across your body at 60 degrees to the horizon. That's metric 60. It goes up. You catch it straight down out of the air with your palm down in the opposite hand. Cleverly, that hand is now at your side, ready to go 60 degrees the opposite way. Up and down, across and down. If you're successful, let out a hoop, holler, or yippee-i-o. John, let's hit the music if we can. John, we got the music? Yo, John. Hey, John. I think you're getting into this here. Actually, the real reason that they asked me to come here to NIH, given you've had some tensions in the news, is what you really needed is a consultant who's a white Anglo-Saxon straight male to set things straight. Too close to home? Uh-oh. These problems you've had exist everywhere. I get the same kind of requests from IBM as I do from Sprint, as I do from Contel and other organizations. But we need to laugh about them. They're serious. The remedies take management that's crucial, but we need to give ourselves some room to do well and laugh at the experience. That's why I threw that in. But we're now to the 8th step. The 8th step, well, let me just ask, how many of you are convinced that lurking ahead is some Olympic step that you're going to fail? I would have worried about that too, but we're just building on our success. In fact, you've already juggled 1. We'll move on to 2 if you wish. Watch it without words. 1 second, type Bs. If you start too soon, they won't be able to see behind you. And the type A's get nervous that they won't hear the words either. Hold it 1 second, boys and girls. You go across your body at 60 degrees to the horizon. That's what I just learned. Yes? Yes. You toss it high. Now you watch the one you're tossing first. Get rid of the second one. Catch the one you're watching. And find out if the next one is in range. So it goes 1, 2, 1, 2. John, let's hit the music. Good. Excellent, excellent. What is our young friend's name? What is his name? Huh? Danny? Huh? David. David. David, when you grow up, this is what you get to act like. Just want to let him know. Informed consent. I'm going to actually skip the 9th step because the 9th is the mirror image of the 8th. I do the 8th right, left. The 9th, left, right. Don't have to worry about, because the 10th step, the jug, 3 up and 3 caught, takes care of any problems you might have had up until this point. To get ready for it, you put 1 between your pinky and your palm, and 1 between your thumb and your forefinger. Make a little space, because yours tend to cling with some static in them. And 1 palm down. And I'm going to ask you to watch while I demonstrate 4 different successful pathways to 3 scarf juggling now. If you want to stay at 2, you may. You don't need to try this. Remember, guilt-free drops, you could have at least 3 of them per toss, or per attempt here if you wish. That's an important learning step, to make a mistake and then move on. But I'm going to show all 4, so please wait until I show all 4, because they allow success for every skill level in the room. You're wondering if 0 skill? It's the most fun of all. I'll show you in just a second. Now, I'm going to show you the regular pattern called the inside cascade. You always start 3-object juggling with the hand that has 2 in them. 2 in them. And then you just alternate. Let me demonstrate all 4 first. So I'll ask you to wait. It goes right, left, right, catch, catch. That's the jug. If you're successful at it, let me tell you about the 11th step, because any pattern you get success on for 10, you must lead smooth as silk without any hesitation to the 11th step, called the ta-da! You celebrate what you have set out to accomplish. So it goes right, left, right. It's called the inside pattern. For some of you, you'll have a natural outside pattern. As long as you assist the people near you finding their contact lenses, that's okay. Some of you will find that conceptually it's easier if they don't cross and you do columns. Perfectly legitimate. Have any skill at any physical activity, if your parts hurt or you're missing some or they don't move right, with the appropriate Art Carney preparation and with the music, faking it looks the best of all. So it goes right, left, right, catch, catch. Let's try that. Hit the music, John, if you would. Again, if you're successful, let's hear the ta-das. John, are we still on? Is it soup yet? Maybe it's not here. Let me try this. There we go. Let's try it.
So good, so good. I got you. I feel nothing. The sugar is fine. I feel nice. The sugar is fine. So nice, so nice. I got you.
Let's do one together. 1, 2, 3. Ta-da! Wonderful. Boys and girls. I'm going to try back here if I can. Are we back up on this one yet? Not yet. John, are we? Can we roll over to the podium? That sounds better. Let me demonstrate the 12th step, but encourage you to try this on your own as you return to those offices and homes where at this moment, in general, there are people who are carrying out all of their own responsibilities and all of yours. You rush back, say, let me show you what I learned. When one is energized from any continuing education, it's crucial to be able to listen first. And at some moment they'll say, what the heck are those for? After you've heard how their day went. And then it tells you they're ready to hear about this juggling foolishness. And you'll have your scarves with you, of course. The 12th step is juggling. Whenever one is in the air, just toss another one. You can mix and match styles if the air conditioning so desires. Because the pattern for 3 is the same as the pattern for 103 throws. Now, I've seen a couple of familiar faces here, one of whom reintroduced Mel Stern from my graduating class at USC in 1970. It occurs to me, we didn't know each other a lot then, but it's a wonderful thing to see a face. And do I see a familiar face next to you as well? No, I don't. Well, when you get old, you can't remember who's familiar. But it is a treat to see some familiar faces. What I do see is a lot of friendly faces, some of whom are wondering, how in the world will I translate this back to my workplace? Fun here, but hey, does this mean anything? I will encourage you to put your scarves on your desk if you work around a desk, in some decorative sort of bowl or just with a paperweight holding them down. And if somebody has a complaint, then I encourage you to demand that they juggle for 1 minute first, and then sit down as the two of you sort of attempt to be creative. Now, I would like you to take a moment in your own mind and recognizing the qualifier that your own brain can take you back physiologically miles to very low places in your life very, very quickly. I don't want you to race back, but I would like you to measure the distance between how you felt a few minutes ago at the height of the lighthearted foolishness, the revelry, how you felt in your own body, what your emotions in your body were telling you, and how far that is from the last time you felt very alone, or very hopeless, or very helpless, unappreciated, or unloved. Don't race back there because you undo it all. I know I can't stop some of you from going there, but the question is, if this was a distance that's substantial, as it is for me, how do you get to the high? What does it take to get you there on command when you really need it, when I'm not here? One is permission to do it. You give yourself permission to be more playful. And the second is props. And I've given you my props, but you don't have to use those. We will also give you a prescription in your packet that has on the reverse, it has the outline for the juggling steps so you can teach other people. On the back it says, not for emergency use only. It emphasizes the preventive nature of laughter and humor to diffuse situations before they get to a critical mass. There is, and I'm embarrassed to say, in the midst of scientists and the heart of the highest of academic medicine in the country, but there's some tantalizing early research that talks about creativity being enhanced if you've been laughing. This people use intuitively. After you've been playful, sometimes you get wonderful ideas. But in problem solving, people get better ideas and a broader range of ideas if they've been doing something lighthearted for a half an hour or so before. It's certainly, there's so much research about the effects of stress, a waft of information about reducing or unhooking the effects of stress if you're being playful. There is certainly, you'll recognize from your own lives, anecdotal and now some sociologic research that says people trust people who smile and laugh, if it's genuine, better than if they don't laugh. Conversely, you may know somebody in your life who never smiles. It's very hard to trust them as a person if they don't smile. Now, I'm intrigued in my own experience in the last few years. I've been blessed with the opportunity to work for Indian Health Service at the Zuni Pueblo in western New Mexico. I was drawn there for a set of reasons which to the Zunis was, of course, you will be here, and I didn't know that I was being drawn. But one of the things that I found as I arrived is that there are 4 classes of healers of roughly equal stature. First, there are medicine men and women. To be a medicine man or woman, one is chosen sometimes in childhood and trained by the other healers. Or, if you are touched by a major illness or injury, you may elect to become a healer, to join the medicine societies. And too often, I think, physicians particularly, but many of us in healthcare forget what we can learn from the people who are afflicted with the illnesses that we're trying to help and cure and the pain we're trying to stop. So at Zuni, if you have been touched with the power of an illness or injury and survive, you now have the option of assuming the rest of the powers of the healer. The third group are bone pressers. When we cast somebody with a forearm fracture, instead of a full plaster cast, they use a half cast and an ace bandage so that the bone presser can remove that when the person also goes for simultaneous traditional healing and visits for manipulation, and then they rest it back in the cast and wrap it up again. So the Western and traditional folks work quite smoothly at Zuni most of the time. And the fourth class are clowns. That is, one may take a spiritual healer who will brighten your spirits with laughter and play and face paint, different than Ringling Brothers tradition, but not different in concept. And you may choose which kind of healer you choose for your own illness, that they have a sense that their own body will know what kind of healer is best for them. So this lightheartedness thread sort of floats through lots of my life. Let me just stop for a moment and see if you have questions. As we've played for this a little bit, maybe you have some questions that are percolating in your own mind. We have some microphones here which make it easier, but if you're stuck in the middle of an aisle, I'll repeat your question for the video and for those people in Bosnia, I think, is where they're. Any thoughts or questions? I'll actually answer them about anything, including Jane or any part of my family.
Yes, I've noticed that people who are pretty witty and humorous and can think, you know, of something just right off the top of their head in a moment when it's really needed, seem to be really bright. I've noticed that comedians sometimes are really brilliant people. So I was wondering, is that something that's inherited or that you've observed? Or can anyone, if they work at it, be a comedian or humorist?
Well, I don't think you need to be a comedian in order to... Well, let me just repeat. What you said was that you've noticed that people are, that seem to be brighter. There is certainly a type of humor that requires understanding the language quite well and the nuances of language in order to understand the joke. But people are divergent in what makes them laugh. My wife is very bright, very funny woman. She is one of the funniest teachers I've ever met, but we overlap about this much. So we sit at a movie sometimes, she's got her arms folded, and she says, "So what's funny about that?" I'm falling off the chair. She says, "What's funny?" I said, "I don't know about this line because I'm listening to you talk. Let's just, you know, if it wasn't funny, it wasn't funny, you know? It doesn't have to be funny to you." And there are certain movies that we know ahead of time, only I should go. I should just go alone. So everybody laughs at something. There is enough visual humor, enough sort of slip on the banana peel sense of impending risk and that is involved in surprise sort of humor that makes Monty Python funny. I think regardless of IQ, you may laugh in a different way if you understand at all of the levels that it's funny. But if it makes you smile, keep that on your desk. If Joel Goodman, a good friend, says, get one of the black notebooks that you have notarized for your work, and put the things that make you laugh. It's what your kids say, what your neighbor's grandchildren say, what your friend's lover says that made you laugh that day. It doesn't have to be a comedian. So you can have a sense of humor and appreciate humor and be delighted each day and set out to make yourself laugh on your own terms without worrying about how sophisticated it needs to be. Yes?
I'm glad you said that because that's what I was concerned about. I do what you said. I sometimes write things down and I think of something that's really funny or something that someone has said. And I was just wondering, sometimes I get a real good laugh at something and sometimes you don't. But I guess it just depends on what's inside that person that makes the person laugh. And some people can relate and others can't.
It also depends on where you are in grieving and problems in life. I mean, I do hear from people that say, wait a minute, I do the hospice team. I'm doing cancer research here. Everybody's in dire straits who we treat. I do the AIDS group, the parents without partners, the people without parts, the people without AIDS with parents without partners with parts. Wait a minute, did he just make a joke about people with AIDS, cancer? Well, yeah, I did. I tried to laugh. People come to me with that, but yeah, you can't be funny there, and then they stop themselves and they answer their own question. They say, I have wonderful fun. Some of the funniest moments of my life have been with people in crisis. When my father had cancer, he laid with an overdose of morphine not recovery, but ICU. His breathing rate fell to 3. Triggered the alarms. He heard over the PA, he was awake during the whole episode and heard on the PA system his own code being announced, but he didn't know it was for him. He heard code blue, room 455. And he thought, oh, some poor schnook is in major trouble. Boom, the doors open up, the crash cart comes running in, 50,000 people enter the room, as there always happens, and it took them a long 2 or 3 minutes while somebody breathed for him. During every one of those 2 or 3 minutes, he was convinced he was dying, because he's only seen that happen, and thought at his age of 65 with colon cancer and recovering from surgery that his likelihood of surviving was not, but he had a lot of morphine on board, so it was, hey, you know. But he was awake, and he said after 2 or 3 minutes where they finally determined what was wrong and were giving him the antidote to morphine, he said he heard a voice, a young woman's voice from the door, do her part of the code, and she said, what's his condition so we can notify the family? And the doctor, rather abruptly, still in the midst of the crisis, said, well, his condition's critical, of course. To a comedian, a word like critical, which has at least several meanings, he said he thought this was his last thinking moments and he's about to die. His voice answered the question, what's his condition? Critical, of course. He said, sure, I'm critical of the food, of the doctors, of the nurses. So it's a matter of allowing yourself the permission to do that and knowing that there are times when you're crying, there are times when you're furious, and it doesn't work. But I find in our household we tend to step into the humor more quickly than other households. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't take weeks to get over grieving, that you don't have hours per day of fear and loneliness. It means you step into humor a little more often if you're willing to. And at those minutes, you're 2 points ahead. In basketball, you get an extra basket, you steal the ball, you at least weren't sad during those moments. Does it keep you alive longer? I don't know. There are places studying that, but I don't know that it will matter. It doesn't matter to me if I develop cancer. And that, yes, for those of you who know, with my family risk and of colon cancer. Being over 40, I have had my evaluation. Those of you over 40 should as well. Should I come down with cancer? The question is, how joyful can I be during that time? In fact, a gentleman at Harvard who had an odd abdominal cancer with very, very poor survival, but he's out 10, 12 years into the tail of the survival curve, having done quite nicely. When, I think it was Tufts, came up with a study that says you didn't live longer, you just felt better. He asked me what I thought of that study, and I sort of waffled on my answer. I said, what do you think as a person surviving cancer? He said, I thought it was arrogant. What do you mean, just feeling better? Feeling better was what I got up to do every day. If I could feel better for a few hours, that's what was called being alive. It was better than the alternative. So even if it doesn't turn out to be you just enjoy your hours, that's a good enough outcome for me. Now, you folks, it seems to me, are already in tune with this, but maybe you conceptualize it differently. You get joy and buzz your endorphins in a different way, some of you. And that has to do with the joy of knowledge. How many of you who are over 35 watched Mr. Wizard as a kid? A science show. Don Herbert was on again in the late 70s with another batch of kids, and he looked awfully good, as a matter of fact. But there was that, golly, Mr. Wizard, we figured that out. You get off on enjoying the fact that there's new science to be found. Even posing a new question can give you the same buzz. For lots of the rest of us, we're not smart enough to get that buzz all the time. I get that buzz trying to figure out how they print a comic book or put soup in a can, as I do from answering a question skillfully from a patient who asks me one question but's really asking me another. I get the same joy out of that, which is sort of neat that I'm in medicine these days. Now, am I trying to save your life, change your life completely? Then I'll be off shortly here. Roger wondering if we're here for life or not. I'm not trying to change every aspect, just a little bit. You don't have to be as zany as a flight attendant on a U.S. air flight. I was flying coast to coast. She had said some mildly funny things like, we are about to serve lunch. We have 3 entrees to choose from. We have a meat dish, lasagna, and chicken. We're sorry in advance if we're not able to accommodate each of your first choices, since we can't stock all of every item. However, it doesn't matter because they taste the same. You couldn't complain. She cut off 3 grumpy people from complaining, who not only weren't grumpy at her, therefore lightening her burden, and she did it in a preventive way, but they weren't grumpy, perhaps, at all. You don't have to be that zany. I did, at the end of the flight, see her on her hands and knees, crawling up from behind to my row, and she said, I can't find it. She's looking under both sides. I said, well, I'll help you. I'm about to unhook and get out and look. What are you looking for? I'll help you find it. She said, I can't find it. I really have looked. I've looked and looked. I said, what is it you're looking for? She said, the glamour they said I would find in this job. Absolutely true. 8 people laughed, a couple of rows, and she then moved forward and did the setup. Somebody nibbled, and she did the punchline, and another bubble of laughter occurred. And the rest of us then, who had been in on it, then watched her go up in surprise and delight. Small clumps of people. She crawled under the curtain into first class, and you could hear them laughing as well. You do not have to be that silly or go through that much revolution in your life. But to enjoy yourselves, to place joy inside yourself on purpose, I think has high efficacy. It is low risk, although there are risks. Every harassment case, the guy says, I was just joking. There are victims, there's sarcasm, there's angry uses of humor, not all of which are all bad, but they are much riskier for sure. And there are herd effects. That is, one person laughs, often people around them will laugh. But I will tell you honestly that I really did come with high hopes that I would change your lives completely, forever. Well, I had an hour and 20 minutes, and I'm a doctor. Arrogance alert. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Arrogance alert. But let me test and see if perhaps I have changed your perspective just enough, and the way you will know is that as I take you mentally, and you go there in reality sometime later in the week, I'm going to take you mentally to a place you may go every week. And I want you to see if it looks different now. That place, now you're a new juggler. This may not have been the most fun you've ever had in your life, but you did juggle something from 1, 2, or 3 objects to varying degrees of ability and satisfaction, but you all changed your perspective as jugglers. Go to this place with me and see if it looks different now. In your mind's eye, take a look down the fruit and vegetable aisle at the supermarket. Not a small market, a supermarket, where there's 50 linear feet on each side of at least one row, probably more than one, where they stack up the juggling implements by color and texture and size. You got 12 feet of citrus at least. Lemons and limes and oranges and grapefruits. If that looks a little different, then maybe what we have done has had a little bit of effect for you. I'm going to ask you to look, and I'll finish with this, at the word silliness, which has come to mean, as its first line definition in the dictionary, inane and stupid. Childish, those are the 3 meanings. But if you look below the first paragraph,